Untold Skirmish at Bolton's Depot, Mississippi. The skirmish that bought time. What happens when a war-weary lawyer turned colonel decides to make a last stand at a forgotten rail junction? Why did Union cavalry, fresh off the greatest victory of the war, stumble into a firefight they never saw coming? How did a 2-hour skirmish at a place called Bolton's Depot delay an entire campaign and give the Confederacy one last breath? This isn't Gettysburg. It's not Antietam. It's not even Vicksburg. This is the story of Bolton's Depot, where the echoes of Grant's masterstroke met the grit of a rear guard who refused to vanish quietly. You'll meet Brigadier General William Suey Smith, a West Point engineer with a taste for fast raids and a habit of arriving late. You'll meet Colonel William F. Tucker, a Mississippi native who traded courtroom arguments for battlefield grit. You'll see how terrain, timing, and sheer stubbornness turned a minor clash into a major delay. And you'll ask, what if Tucker hadn't held the line? Why did Smith hesitate? How did this forgotten fight shape the next moves of the war? This is not just a skirmish. It's a story of honor, improvisation, and the chaos that followed Vicksburg's fall. By May 18, 1863, Ulysses S. Grant had encircled the Confederate fortress of Vicksburg, Mississippi. What followed was a 47-day siege that tested every ounce of endurance on both sides. Grant's army, over 70,000 strong, dug trenches, built artillery emplacements, and cut off all supply routes. Inside the city, General John C. Pemberton, a Virginian by birth but a Confederate by choice, commanded 30,000 troops. His men were starving, sick, and surrounded. Prominent figures included General William T. Sherman, leading assaults on the northern defenses, General James B. McPherson coordinating siege lines, General John A. Logan, whose troops dug trenches so close to Confederate lines they could hear enemy conversations. Inside Vicksburg, civilians and soldiers alike ate rats, mules, and shoe leather. Disease spread. Morale collapsed. Pemberton, under pressure from his own officers and facing starvation, surrendered on July 4, 1863. The fate of the Confederacy is sealed. One Union officer wrote, "With Vicksburg's fall, the Mississippi River became a Union highway, and the Confederacy was split in two, isolating Texas, Arkansas, and western Louisiana." But not everyone surrendered. Scattered Confederate units, supply trains, and rear guards fled eastward, hoping to regroup in Jackson, Mississippi. One key waypoint was Bolton's Depot, a small but strategic rail junction about 20 miles east of Vicksburg, nestled between Jackson and Edwards Station. Bolton's Depot sat on the Southern Railroad of Mississippi, a vital artery connecting Vicksburg to Jackson and beyond. The terrain was rolling hills, dense pine forests, and open farmland, ideal for ambushes and cavalry raids. The town of Bolton, incorporated in 1871, had a modest population of 600 to 700 in the 1860s. It was named after the Bolton family, early settlers and landowners. The depot itself was a hub for ammunition, food, and wounded men, a lifeline for the crumbling Confederate defense. After Vicksburg fell, Bolton's Depot became a choke point. Confederate forces streamed through, trying to escape Union pursuit. The depot was the last stop before Jackson. If it fell, the retreat would become a rout. Union cavalry, led by Brigadier General William Suey Smith, swept eastward to disrupt Confederate movements, cut off escape routes, and destroy supply lines. Union commander, Brigadier William Suey Smith. Born in Tarleton, Ohio, Smith was a West Point graduate, class of 1853, and a civil engineer before the war. He had built bridges across the Niagara River and worked on harbor improvements in the Great Lakes. Smith was known for aggressive pursuit tactics, a love of fast-moving cavalry raids, a tendency to delay operations as seen in the Meridian Campaign, where his late arrival nearly jeopardized Sherman's plans. Smith's weakness? He was overly cautious at times, waiting for ideal conditions that never came. But at Bolton's Depot, he moved fast. Confederate rear guard, Caller William F. Tucker. Born in Iredell County, North Carolina, Tucker moved to Houston, Mississippi in 1848. He was a lawyer, judge, and political ally of John C. Breckinridge. When war broke out, he raised the Chickasaw Guards, which became Company K of the 11th Mississippi Infantry 3. Tucker fought at First Bull Run, Perryville, wounded in the arm, Murfreesboro, Chickamauga, Chattanooga. He was promoted to brigadier general in 1864, but was wounded again at Resaca, forcing him out of field duty. In July 1863, he was still a colonel, trying to hold together the remnants of his brigade. His men were exhausted, undersupplied, demoralized. Many had lost friends and family at Vicksburg, but Tucker was determined to buy time for the retreating columns behind him. The sun had barely crested the pine-covered hills when Brigadier General William Suey Smith's Union cavalry approached Bolton's depot from the west. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of scorched rail ties still lingered from earlier sabotage attempts. Smith's men, veterans of fast-moving raids, were expecting a quick sweep. What they got instead was a wall of resistance. Why Bolton's depot? Because it was a strategic rail junction, connecting Vicksburg to Jackson via the Southern Railroad of Mississippi. After Vicksburg's surrender on July 4th, Confederate forces were in full retreat. Bolton's depot became a choke point, a last gasp of organized resistance before Jackson. Colonel William F. Tucker, a Mississippi native and former lawyer-turned-soldier, had arrived at Bolton's depot with roughly 400 to 500 exhausted Confederate troops. These were the remnants of shattered brigades, men who had survived Shiloh, Corinth, and now the collapse of Vicksburg. Many had lost family, comrades, and any illusion of victory. Tucker knew he couldn't hold the depot indefinitely, but he could buy time. His men overturned rail cars, reinforced fences with timber, and positioned sharpshooters in the surrounding woods. The terrain was their ally. Rolling hills, dense pine, and narrow clearings made for perfect ambush points. Smith's cavalry dismounted, standard procedure when approaching fortified positions. They advanced cautiously, fanning out in skirmish lines. The first shots rang out from the woods, Confederate sharpshooters picking off Union scouts. Smith's men returned fire, pushing forward in staggered formations. The Confederates, using terrain to their advantage, fired from cover, then fell back to secondary positions. It was a textbook delaying action. About 45 minutes into the fight, Smith ordered a flanking maneuver, sending a detachment around the northern edge of the depot to cut off Tucker's escape. But Tucker had anticipated this. He had placed a small reserve force in the woods who ambushed the flanking party and forced them to retreat. Smith's frustration grew. He had the numbers, but Tucker had the ground and the grit. The skirmish lasted just under 2 hours, but it was intense. Smoke hung low over the depot. Horses screamed. Bullets tore through timber and tin. Tucker's men, low on ammunition, began to fall back in small groups. Realizing he had achieved his goal, delaying Union pursuit, Tucker ordered a tactical withdrawal toward Jackson. His men melted into the woods, regrouping along the rail line. Smith captured a handful of prisoners, mostly wounded or cut off during the retreat. They were interrogated, then sent to Union field hospitals or holding camps near Vicksburg. But the bulk of Tucker's force escaped. Smith continued his cavalry operations but was later criticized for delays during Sherman's Meridian Campaign in 1864. His cautious nature, while sometimes effective, often clashed with the aggressive tempo of Union strategy. He retired from the Army and returned to civil engineering, helping design bridges and railroads across the Midwest. Tucker was promoted to brigadier general in 1864 but was wounded at Resaca, Georgia, and never returned to active field command. After the war, he resumed his law practice in Mississippi and became a state legislator. He died in 1881, remembered locally as a man of quiet resolve and battlefield cunning. Though small, the skirmish at Bolton's depot delayed Union pursuit, giving Confederate forces time to regroup in Jackson, disrupted Union momentum, forcing Smith to reassess his advance, highlighted the chaos of post-Vicksburg operations where even minor engagements could shift strategic timelines. Smith later admitted, "I underestimated the resolve of the enemy. They fought like men who had nothing left to lose." And Tucker, in a letter to his wife, wrote, "We fought not for victory, but for honor and for time." Today, Bolton's Depot is a quiet town. The tracks still run, but few remember the clash that once echoed through its hills. Yet for those who study the war's finer threads, it remains a moment of tactical brilliance, human endurance, and the stubborn will to resist. If you found this story riveting, subscribe to our channel for more epic tales from American history, where the past isn't just remembered, it's relived.